Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Diamond Kings, the YouTube baseball talk show everyone is talking about. We are brought to you by the sports-kings.com media network. I am your host, David Whitlock from Houston, Texas again. Yes, the Houston Astros are still in first place and actually have the most wins of any team in baseball right now. The Cardinals could tie them tonight as we record Sunday evening. But enough about them. We're going to talk about several items going on. We had another manager fired today. That's two managers fired, and we're not even to Memorial Day yet. A lot of rumors are going around Troy Tulowitzki. The Rockies look awful, as they always have been. It's time that they just trade him to get some return on him, and what teams might make sense for that. And then we'll move on to talk a little bit about the New York Mets. The New York Mets were kind of the darling of the first month of the season. They've had a little slip lately, but they called up one of the prospect pitchers, and he had a good game today. So what the future prospects for them look like. And we'll talk about the American League West again, because suddenly the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim are red hot. They've won 5 straight till they lost today, but the Houston Astros are hot again. They've won 5 straight. So we'll break that down a little bit. Joining me, as always, are my co-hosts. First is Michael Prosser from Florence, South Carolina. How are you, Michael?
A 1-week hiatus cannot keep me away from this. A special belated happy birthday to you, Mr. Whitlock, and a happy birthday to our fellow esteemed colleague Leroy McConnell III, who unfortunately cannot be here tonight because celebrating. Leroy, I hope you have many more, my friend, and throw a few back for me.
Absolutely. We missed Leroy this week. I'd have been disappointed if he spent it with us. Hopefully spending it with his beautiful wife and kids. And thank you for the well wishes. My birthday was this week also. It went fine. Joining us from the West Coast outside, you may not be able to see him. We had some technical difficulties, but Lorenzo Mejia is joining us. How are you today, Lorenzo?
I'm doing great. I am currently at my mother-in-law's house in Altaloma, California, and it's a beautiful day out here, so I'm ready to talk some baseball.
Excellent. We're glad to have you here. It's not quite as beautiful here, a little humid. We're already in that season down here in Houston, but California is always nice. And joining us for the first time this year, but he's no stranger to the show from last year, is Kevin L. Smith. I know you used to live in Rochester, New York, but I think you moved. Why don't you say hi and let us know where you are these days?
Hey everyone, glad to be back. I currently live in Coudersport, Pennsylvania. It's a very small town in Potter County. I'm the sports editor over here at the paper here in the county. So enjoying myself here and taking the small town in as it is.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you back.
Kevin, I am no stranger to your area. My grandparents live in Bradford County.
Oh, geez, that's nice.
All right. Enough with the introductions. Let's get on with it. Lorenzo is changing locations, but we press on. So the first thing we got to talk about is breaking news. The Miami Marlins have cut by Mike Redmond, their manager. It just happened today. They almost were no hit. I believe it was 2 outs in the ninth before they got their first hit. They're sitting there at 16-22, so that's not good. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, it's not good, but it's not
It is
horrible.
a small world.
But so was this the right move to let go of a guy like Mike Redmond? He hadn't been there about, a couple of years. What's the future of this team? Is this a panic move? I mean, you look at that division, it still looks up for grabs for me. So we'll start with the guy closest to the action in the southeastern part of the United States, Michael. How do you break down this move by the Marlins?
Well, let's not forget that 14 years ago. No, it hasn't even been 14 years ago yet. Anywho, the last time that a firing was made by the Miami Marlins with a 16-20-something record was 2003. I don't remind you guys what happened that year. Some guy named Josh Beckett took them all the World Series. Having said that, this is on Mike Redmond. No Jose Fernandez, who will not be back until maybe end of next month, early July, as he recovers from Tommy John surgery. The position has not looked anything to replace Henderson Alvarez or to replace.
All right, I'm having trouble hearing Michael. Is anybody else having trouble?
Am I coming out good?
Yeah, you're coming out good.
Okay, yeah. I can't hear Michael very well.
All right, well, he was going into a little bit about how the pitchers were hurt and how they were struggling with that. We'll get back to him if he can get back online. There he goes. He's dropped off now. But, Kevin, we hear you loud and clear. What do you think of this move by the Marlins? Was it the right move or too early?
It's always been a thing where a former catcher becomes a somewhat good manager. There's Joe Torre, Mike Scioscia, just naming a couple things off the top of my head. It didn't make sense at the moment, but then when I started to realize this team is 16-22, they have somewhat of a talented team, especially with one of the best power hitters in the game in Mike Stanton. Look at Giancarlo Stanton. I can't say Mike Stanton or he gets upset. I liked Mike Redmond as a player, but I don't see him well as a manager. I don't think he's a good leader as a manager. He's a good leader as a catcher, but he's not a good leader as a manager. And I think they had to make the move. But I don't know if I've said this before, but I am not too fond of the Marlins ownership, aka Jeff Loria, who I think is one of the more controversial owners in all sports, with his questionable trades and moves that he's made. So, but I think he might have gone this one right a little bit. But I just think they need to move on to get another manager to lead that team.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting where they go from here, who they might try to bring in. Lorenzo, what do you think about this? Is now the time to be firing managers, or should they have been more patient, waited for Fernandez to come back, that sort of thing?
They have talent right now, so words for you. Ozzie Guillen, bring him back. Great manager in Miami. I want to see him come back. He's a good manager. He's a little bit high-strung, and that's a good way to put it for a team like that. They're young. They have talent. They made a big trade in the offseason. So, yes, it's a good deal. With Giancarlo Stanton, you can ride him all season long. Alex Fernandez coming back. They're in a good spot right now, but ultimately he was not the right leader for the team, so it is a good thing.
Yeah, tough to say. Okay, Michael, you're back. I think when we dropped you, you had already talked about Jose Fernandez and had gone into his name escapes me, the other starting pitcher that started off slow. But continue your thought on this move for the Marlins.
Well, as I was saying before, my technology so rudely decided to interrupt me. It's not all Redmond's fault. Like I was mentioning, Hernandez, Matt Latos has not been pitching anywhere to standards like they thought he was going to. Henderson Alvarez is 0-3. The Atlanta Braves completely own Marlins Park. They're 6-0 this season. Marcelo Zuna has not been swinging the bat that well. Steve Shishak has been relieved of his closing duties. It's not all Redmond's fault, but obviously somebody has to take the blame. As we found out in Angels in the outfield, you can't trade 25 players. Somebody has to take the fall, and unfortunately it was Mike Redmond. Was it the right thing to do? Only time will tell, but we'll surely see.
Yeah, I think only 30 games into the season. You're about a fifth of the way through the season. Seems a little quick for me, but at the same time, we've seen it work before for them and for some other teams, so it's their move to make. And Ozzie Guillen's an intriguing name. I've heard Dusty Baker on Twitter today. Could be a lot of different directions that goes. So the next rumor flying around is about Troy Tulowitzki, the all-world shortstop. When he's healthy for the Colorado Rockies, I believe either he or his agent contacted the team to request a trade or to okay a trade, but the talks are ongoing. The Rockies look like they're going nowhere fast, and he in the prime of his career could get them a haul of prospects, and so they hold some cards there. What teams might they should the Rockies trade him, and if they trade him, what teams will be the most interested? And we'll skip and go back to Lorenzo this time.
Troy Tulowitzki and the Rockies, they should just clear the house right now. Get rid of Carlos Gonzalez. Now, Troy Tulowitzki, he's good. He's got a big contract. So there's only one team that makes sense, and that's the New York Yankees. Trade him to the Yankees. Didi Gregorius is not doing well in there. They have a limitless payroll, and ultimately he'll do good on the big stage. He's made the playoffs, and he made the World Series back in 2007. But other than that, he hasn't ever really had the national spotlight on him. So give him the chance, trade him to New York.
No, yeah, New York, that rumor's been going around for a year and a half now with Peter retiring and the interest there, and would be the next guy. I certainly think it makes sense. I don't know if his temperament can handle the Big Apple, but certainly on paper, and like you said, that contract is huge. So that's going to really pare down the amount of teams that could bid for him. We'll go back to Kevin this time. What do you think about Tulowitzki? Should they trade him or should he go?
I think the relationship between Tulo and the Rockies has been rocky for many years. It's just a relationship that needs to end. They need to trade Cargo as well. Tulo, honestly, I don't really see him as a New York guy because the Yankees have relied so heavily on Didi Gregorius because they want to mold him into the premier shortstop that they're hoping that he can be. But here's a curveball for you, David. Why don't they trade him to the Astros when they need them? I'm trying to remember who's the shortstop at the Astros right now.
Yeah, Jed Lowry was the opening day guy, but he's about as good as Tulowitzki in terms of about 2 weeks before he gets hurt. So they're toggling between Jonathan Villar as well as Marwin Gonzalez. But the curveball there is that we've got Carlos Correa, who's just tearing it up in the minor leagues. Mm-hmm. He's the #1 draft pick from a couple years ago. Some people are upset they didn't call him up when Lowry went down, but they said, hey, we got a process. He'll be up soon. Of course, they're trying to delay that clock to free agency as well. But Correa will be the opening day shortstop next year, and he will be up this year. It's just a matter of whether he'll be up on like June 1st or July 1st. So,
and Tulo's in the last year of his contract, isn't he?
Yeah, I have to look that up. I can't remember if he's.
I mean, it makes sense for the playoff run, like to get those extra boosts. But saying Tulo should leave Colorado has been like a broken record. Like they should rely that team around more around Aaron and just move on.
Yeah. So they just re-signed Tulowitzki to a really long-term deal. He'll be owed about $20 million a year through 2019, and then it tapers off to about $14 or $15 million a year. So he's locked up through 2021, and $20 million a year actually isn't a lot if you can get him to be healthy for 160 games. I mean, to have an elite player that I think would be a perennial MVP candidate for about $20 million is, you look at the Giancarlo Stanton deal, that started to look like a little bit of a bargain. But again, the health is an issue. Michael, how do you break down the Tulo situation?
Well, I'm in a sense in going to agree with Lorenzo, but as we say down here in the South, right church, wrong pew. I'm sending this man to the other side of New York, and I'm sending him to the New York Mets. And now I know what you're thinking. Why?
Oh man, we're just getting good too.
Why an Atlanta Braves boy is going to send a powerful shortstop like Troy Tulowitzki to the New York Mets? Because they need him. It's clear and simple. If they're going to compete with the Washington Nationals, who are supposedly the perennial power of this division, they're going to need a big bat in that lineup. Now, when Travis d'Arnaud gets back from his stint on the DL, probably next week, he just got cleared to resume all baseball contact, all drills, everything like that, so he's going to be hitting off a tee later on, probably tomorrow, and going from there. Rookie sensation Kevin Pilecki is going to have to go somewhere, and they're not going to send him back to the minors because the kid is just that good. So including him in the deal, prospect left-hander Steven Matz, Mel Montero, the other right-handed reliever, and then, if potentially a prospect. The only problem with that is if the Rockies do pull that trigger in the near future, it is going to be to tune of being force-fed $25 to $30 million of Troy Tulowitzki's contract. Now, Are they going to be able to do that? How bad do you want this guy out of here? But I agree. A complete overhaul is due in Colorado. They have not been the same team since Todd Helton retired. I would even go so far as to find a new home for the Colorado Rockies, because obviously Mile High Stadium is not cutting it. You're going to keep losing these big run, these absorbent 10-9, 10-7 games without the offense in a ballpark that supports blatant amount of run scoring masterpieces that you can't win. It's kind of, it's just one of those things where, you know what? You had a good run, Colorado. You saw a World Series. But if the team's not going to win, people aren't going to want to watch them, you move on.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Okay, Kevin's back. He dropped off for a second there, it looked like. We got a band in there. You and Lorenzo both within 5 seconds of each other. I was like, all right, it's just Michael and I now.
Yeah, apparently I have offended some people in saying that the Colorado Rockies should not exist anymore.
Yeah, Lorenzo's a West Coast guy. He's like, I'm tired of this bias. Bam, I'm out of here.
He drops the mic and leaves.
I think the only person you'd be offending right now is Todd Helton.
Might be. Yeah.
I miss Todd Helton. Todd Helton was amazing.
Wasn't he just here last year? I mean, he's only never mind. Some interesting points is that you mentioned Mile High Stadium. Of course, they play in Coors Field now, and you might not even know that Coors Field is the third oldest stadium in the National League. Of all the stadiums in the National League, Coors Field is actually the third oldest. It's only behind, of course, Wrigley and then Dodger Stadium. But it seems like they can never maybe get it going there in Colorado with the way the hitting goes. But let's not just sell them off to Montreal just yet. But I think Tulo will go somewhere this year. I think they've reached a point where Hunter Pence wasn't quite that good for the Astros, but when the Astros were really starting to head down, and the only real young player they had that they could trade was Hunter Pence, they traded him. They got tons of value back, and then Pence left Philly for another team a year or two later, and we made out with prospects, and here we are now. So,
speaking of Hunter Pence, that's another destination for Mr. Troy Tulowitzki is the San Francisco Giants because, they're always in a deadline deal like that.
Yeah, they're always willing.
But don't be surprised if he stays out west and goes to San Francisco.
You got Brandon Crawford there, though.
He's a second baseman, is he, no?
Crawford plays
Isn't Crawford playing right now?
The one point I wanted to make about, and we're going to talk about the New York Mets next, and we'll let Michael go first because he already touched on it. But their current shortstop is Wilmer Flores, and he leads the team in home runs with 6 home runs. So how bad could it possibly be? He's out more home runs than Lucas Duda, more home runs than Curtis Granderson, all those guys. So
that's saying a lot for that being AT&T Park, which is impossible to hit a home run there sometimes. So
right. So about the Mets, what is this team for real? Have they been exposed this week? Is kind of my question, because if you look, they had this big lead. They looked like they were unbeatable, and all of a sudden they came back to earth. I think they lost 5 or 6 straight. They won today on Sunday behind a rookie pitcher. What's his name? Noah Syndergaard made his major league debut. Won today, so another young arm in that system. What do you think about them? The Mets, should they make a lot of big moves to counteract what the Nationals have, what people perceive talent-wise? Are they set and they just need to let their team play? And we'll start with Michael this time since you already started kind of talking about the Mets.
Well, like I said, I think in our first episode of the season, I expected some people in this Mets organization to have breakout years, Travis d'Arnaud being one of them, and he ends up on the DL, almost right out of the gate. But as we've seen, Kevin Pollock has picked up the pace. Bartolo Colon was an interesting, story at the beginning of this season. And then, like you mentioned, they just kind of fell off the face of the earth. They became the Mets that we know and love so dearly. You know what? And I hope to God nobody ever hears me say this, but, good for them. I mean, they're finally starting to do things the right way. They're trying to, play hardball with their crosstown counterparts who just keep wanting to buy, and look what's happening to them. They, don't have a prospect pool. I mean, these guys actually have some talent in the farm here. And that's something that we haven't seen from the Mets in quite some time. I mean, let's not forget the old, God, I don't even remember what the guy's Jason Bay move that they made when, he came over from Boston and it was just a complete disaster. The Johan Santana debacle. I was just as bad as B. Upton going to Atlanta, and yes, you're still B.J. Upton. I don't care what your name is. I mean, it's nice to see the Mets are finally getting it through their thick skulls that, hey, you know what? Maybe we should start building a prospect pool. I mean, look at the St. Louis Cardinals. Year in and year out, the St. Louis Cardinals are top organizations in the game of baseball. Why? Because they build through their system. They're doing it the right way. And the more teams are starting to see this, the more they're going, hey, you know what? Maybe we should stop trying to be like the Yankees and the Red Sox and start trying to do things, the way that the Cardinals are doing it. So, you know what? Good for the Mets. Are they for real this year? Doubt it. If they make it in, it's going to be as a wild card team. That is unless the Marlins have, this unheard of power surge. I mean, they've got the bats to do it. I don't know if they've got the arms anymore, but they've got the bats to do it. Obviously, I mean, if Giancarlo Stanton gets any stronger, it's ridiculous. I mean, the guy, he has got to be the strongest hitter in baseball in probably the last 15 years. He may even be one of the strongest baseball players of all time. I mean, the guy is just towering moonshots. Bryce Harper continues his torrid pace. I mean, that guy is easily NL MVP right now. No ifs, ands, or about it. And as enigmatic as this Braves team is, they're not a playoff team. They have no bullpen whatsoever. Aside from Jason Greeley, they have no bullpen whatsoever. So if the Mets want to, say, hey, let's try something this year, I wouldn't go so far as to give up the entire farm to get something, unless you truly know that, yes, this is the year, this is the team. Next year, it's possible. This year, it's a second wild card spot at best.
Yeah, I think that second wild card spot is up for grabs. If you look, a lot of teams in the NL Central have been more neutral. The Cubs had a good week, so they're kind of on the top of that heap. The Giants have surged to second place in the West. Then you've got, of course, the Nationals and Mets. So I think the playoffs is there for the taking. But so we'll go to Lorenzo next. What do you think about the Mets and their prospects this year? Should they trade? They have a very young team. Should they start dealing some veterans? They do have some veterans too. Granderson, Kadire, guys aren't going to be here that long. What do you think about the Mets?
What I've learned with baseball is when you have a chance to do it, you go all in. And at this year, the Mets have a legitimate chance to go all in. They go, make a big trade, do it. If you look at the team that they're mainly competing against, the Washington Nationals, their team is not that strong this year. They're really not. And so you go all in, you make a big trade, and you have a chance to actually make a splash in the postseason.
Yeah, I think there's like a hot rod going down your street there. That's typical for California. And welcome back, by the way. You dropped off there for a minute. Now you're back outside. But no, some good points. You never know when you're going to be back. You think like, oh, we're building a long-term thing, but then you see teams come and go that they build around, waiting for that season for it all to come together, and it doesn't. You look at teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates. Has their ship sailed? Are they not going to be able to make it again? You look at some other teams in the American League East, like the Baltimore Orioles. They have made a stronger push maybe last year to get that one extra guy. To make a run.
Example is just
who was that?
When you have a chance, you can win. When he's with Washington a few years ago, when they decided to put an innings limit on him, and ultimately he's not been the same pitcher since. So now, when you have the chance to do it, you have to go make a splash. You have to do it.
Yeah, don't get me started on that innings limit thing, because that was a complete botching of oh, we got to save him, and they had it all in front of them, and they let it go. So Kevin, you've been patient. You're from the Northeast, Rochester, New York at one point. What do you think about this Mets team? Are they for real?
I think they are somewhat. I think it started to fall off for them after the Yankees took 2 or 3.
Right.
That series a couple weeks ago. But I just like how they're building from the ground up, building a rotation with Harvey. Unfortunately, Wheeler went down, but I like how they're bringing up Syndergaard, getting him going, and Bartolo Colon is kind of that X factor in the rotation. Um, but I just think there's some things they need to get rid of. I think Randerson's a big one they need to get rid of because he's in the middle of that he's in the middle of that lineup. He's not doing anything. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any home runs this year. And ever since I think see, my thing with Granderson is though, ever since he said that the Mets are a better New York team than the Yankees had this little curse on him, and he hasn't played well since. So that's his fault. Like, no skin off my nose. I mean, he didn't even really help us get to the World Series or anything like that. But I think they have a legitimate chance of making the playoffs this year because looking at the NL East, the only thing they really have to compete with is the Nationals, who are the premier team in the National League. The Marlins will be hanging around. I don't really see the Braves and Phillies. The Phillies obviously not going to be doing much because they're just a team that's going downhill faster than Roadrunner running away from Wile E. Coyote. But yeah, I do see a lot of potential out of the Mets. If they don't make the playoffs this year, I do definitely see them possibly taking the division next year.
Yeah, I love that young rotation. If Syndergaard comes out, and then you've got, of course, Harvey at the top. You've got Jacob deGrom, defending Rookie of the Year. I mean, those could be three potential aces. That they do need some more bats. Like I said, when your shortstop is leading the team in home runs, when Wilmer Flores is leading the team in home runs, that's going to be a problem. Granderson does have 5 homers, but only 13 RBI. I mean, he has 10 extra base hits, 13 RBI, and 130 at bats. You need more out of him.
Well, last time I checked, his batting average is pretty low too. But I mean, his batting average is always low.
Yeah, 248 right now. You know, he's clearly past his prime, but we'll see. I think the Mets are going to be in it. I think they'll be in the mix for a while, but I think they'll just miss one of those wild-card spots. I think 2 playoff positions will come out of the West, and I think the other wild card will come out of the Central. I think a team like the Cubs or Pirates are going to finally gain some footing and make the turn there. So the last subject, we're going to go out west to Lorenzo's territory, talk about the American League West. Now, of course, you got my Houston Astros, who have been in first place for several weeks now. They kind of ascended to first place because the rest of the teams were so lousy. I think we actually took first place and we were still below 500. Then we went on a hot streak, beat some of the American League West teams, got a 4, 5, 6 game lead. It's sitting about there now because you've got the Los Angeles Angels, the favorite. They're the defending division champions. I think they had the best record in the American League last year. They're kind of getting their feet under them. They won 5 straight this week before losing today. Of course, they had the whole Josh Hamilton thing, which we beat to death, and he's gone. So they're past that now. If anything, that's a distraction that's gone. So my question is, with the Angels' resurgence this week, are they now the team to beat, even though the Astros are in first place? Is this a 2-team race, or could teams like the Mariners or even Rangers and A's figure into it? And we've got to start on the West Coast in sunny California with Lorenzo.
Okay, finally we can talk about some real baseball. Here we go. Okay, here it is. With the AL West, it's all about the year of Venezuela. The reason why I say that is because ever since the Angels called up Carlos Perez, the guy they picked up in the Hank Conger trade, their season has turned around. He's a solid catcher playing defense. He's going to bat 280, 290. You heard it here first. He will win the AL Rookie of the Year.
Oh.
There's nobody else in the AL that'll win it. I'm calling it right now. He anchors a rotation. Shoemaker likes to throw to him. Garrett Richards likes to throw to him. It's good. The reason why I also say Venezuela, Jose Altuve's been tearing it up for the Astros. Another short guy from Venezuela. They're doing very well. It's going to be a 2-team race between the Angels who ultimately prevail. Carlos Perez, since his first Major League debut, when he hits the walk-off home run, he's been a godsend for the Angels. I want to go get a personalized jersey of Carlos Perez. He's the Latino version of Mike Scioscia. Bam, I said it. Here we go.
All right. Hey, that series we played about last weekend, we were wrapping up a series up there. And Carlos Perez, he was doing everything. He was gunning guys down. He's particularly good at keeping the running game in check. and he was getting big hits. And it was like, now we traded this guy for Hank Conger, and Lorenzo, I know you love Hank Conger because from that story you told us about seeing him in the Little League when he was younger, but the Astros may come to rue that trade because that is seeming to pan out. We have a plethora of catchers. We ended up letting Corporan go. We've got Max Stassi. We've got some other guys that are coming through the system. So we'll be okay, but it would be painful to see. Well, I'd be glad for Carlos Perez. He's a great guy, but it'd be painful for our franchise to see Perez.
Plus, you got to realize, too, yeah, he was replacing Chris Iannetta. Chris Iannetta was batting a 125. So getting a guy that can hit 280, 290, and be a good catcher back there, it's a great upgrade. And yeah, so AL Rookie of the Year 2015.
Got it. Okay, so we'll check in with Michael next. What do you think about the AL West race?
I don't want to talk about the Astros or the Angels. I want to talk about how bad the Oakland Athletics are doing, which is not something that a lot of people saw coming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely weird to me because they've got a guy I think who was it? Josh Roberts or somebody out there in the outfield is slugging like 390 right now, and they're 13-26. They are tied for the worst record in baseball. Bob Melvin's job. If your ass gets any hotter, you're going to be in hell. I mean, this guy, I don't know what's going on with this team. Billy, you've got to make some major moves out there, man. Moneyball may not be working out for you this year. You might want to call Brad Pitt back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if he goes ahead, and a Moneyball approach would be, all right, this season's lost. I mean, he already rebuilt the team after last year, and they're a playoff team, so he'll just start selling off. You probably meant Josh Reddick. You've got some other pieces on that team, some starting pitching, some bullpen that they could move. So. But yeah, they've been the most disappointing team out there, and like you said, they're tied with the Brewers with afternoon action today. Could swing it either way, but they were worst record in baseball, and look at every bit of it.
And the whole thing started when you moved Yoenis Cespedes to Boston, Lester, and it really went and bit you in the ass. Because what did you need against Kansas City? You did more runs. And what was Yoenis Cespedes going to do? Give you more runs like he did all season. And what did you do? You traded him to Boston. You have nobody to blame but yourself, Billy.
Yeah, the kids are excited about that. I don't know whose kids they are. But Kevin, what do you think about the American League West race? Is this a race that's going to come down to the end, or the Angels just going to out-talent the rest of the division, or can a team like the Mariners figure in?
I have this vibe that the Astros could potentially make the playoffs, but I don't necessarily see them winning the division. I honestly think the Angels are going to take that division. But I say this now, and then maybe a couple months later, I'll say, like, oh, my God. And then a couple months later, the A's will make this miraculous run that they always make in the second half of the baseball season. So I'm not leaving. As bad as the A's are this year, I'm not leaving them out because you can't leave the A's out any year because they just find a way to come back. They were like the Twins a couple years ago. The Twins started out with a sub-500 record, ended up winning the division, making the playoffs. But they ended at the hands of the Yankees in the ALDS every year. But I do like seeing the chances of the Astros getting the wild card, at least the first one. No, actually the second one. I'll go with the second one. I think Detroit's going to take the AL Central, and then Kansas probably take the wild card again. But yeah, the Angels really need to get rid of Hamilton, and that's something they did, and now they can focus on baseball.
Yeah, it's interesting how their resurgence has coincided with that. They put it behind them a little bit, cut ties, and like I said, we've talked about that on previous shows, so we don't need to rehash. But they're starting to scare me a little bit as an Astros fan. The Astros are doing everything right. They're winning with hitting, timely hitting, great starting pitching, a bullpen that's only second to the Royals so far. But it's going to be a good race. Who's that? Go ahead.
Sorry. And I only think the only team that the Astros need to worry about are the Angels and the A's. I don't know what's going on with the Mariners. And I really don't see the Rangers doing much. But yeah, those are really the three teams out of that West that I think are going to be. Well, I'll leave in the A's on the back burner, but the Angels and A's, Astros and Angels are the top two West teams right now.
Astros, Angels, and A's. A lot of A's there. Well, we're going to wrap it up today. I want to thank all my co-hosts, Michael, Lorenzo, and Kevin. We all powered through some technical issues, but great show, good discussion. We'll join you next week for another episode of Diamond Kings.